All right, here we are. Book Pod.
Okay. We're on. And, well, that was a nightmare.
As usual, we spent the first 30 minutes on tech stuff.
Yep. It's not easy podcasting, especially with just
Be careful.
Software that overly... it's just software overly markets itself that is just, yep, bada bing, bada boom, it's done. And it's just not. Yeah. It's not that.
No, but it is free software. And so, I think we have I think they overmarket, you're right, and we have high expectations. And so we'll try this. This is our 10th podcast, I think. And so we'll try this iteration and see if it works. And today's a makeup.
Yeah, this is actually episode 8.
Yeah, we're going back. No, actually, it's episode 7.
Well, actually, I thought it was 8.
Well, actually, you were wrong. Observe.
6. Oh, okay. I guess I numbered them. Then I got to change the numbering on the website. Maybe.
So we're going back to episode 7 and do a review because, again, tech problems were a highlight of that podcast, and we're going to look at Aristotle's Ethics again.
The Nicomachean Ethics by
yes, indeed.
Aristotle. And boy, do I have notes on this one.
Okay, shoot.
Well, so, this is a book that is important or whatever. and
totally.
One of the ancient Greek philosophers of the triumvirate of Socrates, Plato, and then Aristotle's the third. So what do we got here? Who chose this?
Somebody named Joe chose this. It is a very, very, very important book, and it is a very, very, very important philosopher because his concepts. I think when I started reading the Ethics, it came to me and started doing a little research also online about him because, I never took a philosophy class myself. He has so infiltrated Western culture that we're just kind of not even aware of how important he is. But he is, the first word that came to my mind about him is he's a codifier. He puts names to things through his observation and through his observations as well as his high-minded moral and ethical sense. So it's the observation aspect of his skills that keeps him grounded. So he's very practical when it comes to his philosophy. It's not theoretical or ethereal. It's very practical. It's relative. But I think it is so very important because it's been serving our, values, for lack of a better term, since he came up with the names for things.
Yeah. To begin this book a long time ago, I saw a YouTube that showed a painting by Raphael showing Plato on the left with his finger pointing in the air and Aristotle on the right with his hands facing the ground, and Plato was his teacher, Plato is all about the cerebral and ultimate truth can't by nature or perfect knowledge can't exist in the world. It's only in the mind. So that's where that's our end goal, is truth as a theoretical concept. And Aristotle's like, well, we got people who need help right here. How do we apply it to their daily practical lives and actually improve society? And having said that, I feel smart.
You should, because in a nutshell, it sort of demonstrates the difference between those two. You're right. Plato was very ethereal, very theoretical, and Aristotle, he got down to business. I mean, the very fact that this is a book about ethics, which means acting responsibly and morally, and not these moral concepts, but really nuts and bolts. How do you do this? What do you do day to day? How do you be an ethical person? And how do you enrich your life and reach your goal, your ultimate goal, which he defined as happiness. And he covers just about everything that a young man in his class would need to know to live an ethical, moral life and achieve happiness.
He gives all these examples, these real examples that I think the word is granularity, where, for example, he talks about everything has to be in balance. For example, you don't want to be too courageous and go run straight into a burning building, but you don't want to be too cowardly and run the other way. Got it? Boom.
Right.
And then
that's the mean.
But then later on, it goes on every case like, oh, what if that fire is a friend of yours? You want to be more? That's better courage there. But what if it's your enemy? Is that not even more courageous to set aside? Or all these different things. And by the end of it, he's got so many facets to these particular cases that even I was like, all right, you know what, you need to get out of here. Because look, we got one rule, and it's the death penalty, so you go to jail, or hey, you're good. And I was hankering for some tyrannical policy.
Some absolutes.
I get that it's case. Okay, yeah, enough. Okay, you jail, you good. Okay, done.
That's
next.
Absolutism. That's absolutism, and that is what Plato was, and that is what Aristotle takes issue with. You cannot make these absolutes. You have to consider the circumstances and the surroundings, and that's why everything is relative, because he is reasonable. And what I find interesting with this relativism is not that it's a bad thing, but it is that what a prudent man would interpret as good behavior or bad behavior. And that is the basis for our legal system, which is based on English common law. It's based on precedents. It's not based on an absolute rule. You have to do it this way, or you have the death penalty. It's, what happened in the past? How did we resolve these issues in the past? What was reasonable then, and is it reasonable now? That's English common law. That's Aristotle. I'm sure he informed that whole deal.
Yeah, let's see, I got some notes here. Speaking of which, so he was really popular in the medieval times when Thomas Aquinas was one of Aquinas was a super fan of the Greeks, which was controversial at the time, I guess, because people were like, well, if they didn't know who Jesus was, then they're definitely in hell, and we definitely don't want to be like them. I mean, that's just simple mathematical reason right there. Mm-hmm. And then Aquinas is like, no, they had some good stuff. But per the intro of my Penguin Publishing book, Aristotle had some good logic, but he was not a scientist at all. Like he said that the Earth was, or the universe was geocentric, where everything revolves around the Earth, and that was accepted dogma at the time. But other actual scientists like Copernicus and Galileo were like, no, that's just, you're just gonna twist yourself in knots to try to arrive at this understanding that you really want, but it makes way more sense if it's the sun is the center and we're all just spinning around that. And that's why they were persecuted as heretics against the church, because the church was on the side of Aristotle.
The geocentrics, anyway. Yeah,
they had so become Aristotle's super fans that it included his errant scientific knowledge, that if you went against the church, then you were persecuted.
That's right. You were a heretic. Yeah, as Galileo can attest. That's right. And Thomas Aquinas was a very influential theologian. We are still using the reasoning or the essays of Thomas Aquinas to decide how we feel about things, including abortion. Thomas Aquinas made a treatise on when life begins, and does it begin at conception? I don't remember exactly what his conclusion was, but he's still a player in modern day. This is very, it's very interesting that such old men deciding these things, and we're still living by these sayings or these writings.
Speaking of sayings, the thought that the simplest answer is probably the correct one is Occam's razor, which is another throwback to a past podcast episode.
That's right.
Straight man. That was actually when I was Googling Occam's razor. It was that example about the Copernican or heliocentric system versus the geocentric or Ptolemaic system that, it's Occam's razor says, look, it's probably this. It's probably heliocentric because look at it. That just makes more sense, even though you want the humans to be number one. I think that the thread can be, look, humans are here. We're the only animals that have reason, so we're the best, and that's what we got to do. So it's reasonable that we are here to do that. And who gave us that? God.
We are made in his image.
Yeah, and God made the earth, so we're it.
Yep.
We're the number one.
Yep.
So, of course, the sun helps us, but we're the main thing.
So, of course, the sun revolves around us. Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, just a brief note here, your list may be correct because I'm just looking at my list of podcasts and I don't have Straight Man down here. So perhaps your list is correct after all.
Ooh, ain't no perhaps about it.
Well. So let's give a little historical background to Aristotle. He was, as you said, a student of Plato, and but the kind of life that he lived, in some of my research, I found some historical context, which I found pretty interesting. So I want to just read you a little tiny bit about that.
Alrighty.
If I can find it.
Oh, we got dead air here.
The Greek world. I got it. The Greek world of Aristotle's time was made up of small city-states, each with its own autonomous government. The city-state consisted of slaves, non-citizens, manual laborers, children, women, aliens, and citizens. The citizens were adult males, most of whom had been born to citizen parents. So that's class, right? The citizens governed the city, while the slaves, laborers, and women did all the work to provide the necessary food, shelter, and equipment. And these small city-states, everybody kind of knew everybody else. There was no, or anyone that they didn't know was definitely a stranger. And it was a system whereby you were born into a class, so that when Aristotle makes statements like you have to have a disposition to be good, it is inborn, and it is because of your class that you have that. Because they were freed, because the citizens were freed from the necessity of meeting day-to-day needs, citizens enjoyed a great deal of freedom and luxury. The leisure they enjoyed was highly valued and made possible one of the greatest periods of intellectual energy in human history. That this system was exploitative is hardly debatable, but it also produced an incredible array of philosophy, drama, art, and architecture. Aristotle's students were young citizens whose tuition was meant to prepare them for a life of civic duty. And part of that civic duty was participating in debates about government and how that should function. So that's why rhetoric is another important facet of Aristotle's study, because you have to be able to speak in public in a reasonable way.
Yeah, so I think Aristotle's school was called the Lyceum, and he... his students were probably, just wealthy, annoying boys who, didn't want to... Yeah,
like public school in England, yeah. Yeah, like public school in England, like boarding school here, yeah.
Yep. Whoa. So I got tons of stuff on Greek history if you want to go there, huh? So, It's interesting that Aristotle was from Macedon, which is like, Macedon? What the hell is that? What are you talking about? And this region became so powerful after you think of Athens, you think of Sparta, but after the Peloponnesian War, where Sparta, or the Peloponnesians, actually defeated the Athenians and their powerful Delian League of different islands around Greece that were working together. So Sparta won, and they lost their power, but eventually Macedon rose and just dominated both of those later on, right? And that guy's name was Philip II, and his son is the famous Alexander the Great.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because, well, what's so good about them? And so what was crazy about them is that they were the first place to use like cavalry to totally annihilate or destroy a wave of just walking soldiers. And so usually at the time they'd have these phalanx fighters, which are shield-carrying spear guys who would stab at each other and push on each other, where if another army has no phalanx, they're just randomly hitting you, a phalanx will just steamroll over them, and what they do is they rotate their soldiers so that no one's actually ever tired, because they have long breaks as they rotate to the back. But the Macedonians had these cavalry people called the companions, who with no saddles and no stirrups would ride around and could just penetrate into a phalanx and stab at guys and break apart that wall of soldiers. And another thing that they had that was new at the time, a technological advancement, was they would have their own phalanx also, but would have ridiculously long spears that would stab from way further away. So while you're still walking towards them, that you'd be getting stabbed by the Macedonians. So that's how they came to dominate Greece.
Right. But in Greece, they dominated Greece, but they were still they were not highly regarded. I mean, even though war is a huge factor and something that you have to excel at as a man of a certain class, I think that Aristotle was suspect a bit because he was Macedonian, and he was in at the Lyceum, and then I think he kind of left, and he kind of came back when the time was right. Like, discretion is the better part of valor. He left when the tide sort of turned against Macedonians, but nevertheless he persisted, and he was, even in his time, he was well regarded and famous, I suppose.
Yeah, he was eventually called on to be the teacher of Alexander for like 6 years or so.
That's right.
And then, but he settled in Athens, I think, to do his teaching.
Yes.
And people were like suspicious of him. He's like an agent of this new hegemon, this new boss, local character. And so, can we really trust this guy? So that's all interesting stuff.
It's all background. And in this Lyceum, his goal. So he was also, he's sort of responsible for our kind of, again, very deeply embedded in us, this idea that progress or movement forward or even movement is always towards some kind of goal, right? And so his desire to have this Lyceum is to help these young men, teach these young men how to achieve that goal, that all human endeavors are, by their nature, goal-oriented. And what is that goal? The goal is happiness. How do we achieve happiness? Sit down, I'll tell you in this series of lectures that I'm going to call Ethics, the Nicomachean ethics.
Yeah, I have that also. That's a good segue. That the Aristotle is often called like something is teleological, teleologically speaking, and that comes from the Greek word the telos, which means the goal or the object. Everything has its telos.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have that perspective, you say, well, teleologically, humans should go into space. It's like, oh, okay, because you think humans' goal is to know or
Explore
dominate
or something.
everything, to understand everything we can. So theologically, Aristotle would say, yeah, of course we should go to space and whatever, any example. So that was I feel smart saying that moment also.
The problem with the teleological approach is that Aristotle lost favor when it came time of the Enlightenment, because the men of the Enlightenment were going to observe nature and really do more scientific type observations rather than what things should be, really what things were. What are things like? Just observations that are neutral and based on science and scientific observation. So that in the world of nature, it's boggy ground to talk about teleological advancements or teleological world in nature. So the problem with that is, for example, with evolution, the idea that, yes, God gave the wolves sharp teeth so that they could, bite harder, faster, and be dominant in their circle of life thing. But scientifically speaking, evolution is really those wolves who genetically got sharp teeth were the ones that survived. It was chance. So this goes along with guns, steel, and the other thing, that it is accidental in many cases. It is not a general reaching and achievement by individuals or nature or man.
Whoa, that is totally mind-blowing. Yeah. So that is what I was playing with in my mind, how the medievals and before the Renaissance people were like, teleologically, the goal is to do this. And you just insert, and the goal is God. God gave the goal. So everything is godly. Mm-hmm. So you just plug in Aristotle into Christianity. It's like it's a good engine where, like you just said, the wolf has the teeth because God wanted the wolf to bite something. So bada boom, you're done. Mm-hmm. Case closed. Mm-hmm. But actually, no, you can see that it was just random.
Yeah.
It wasn't that. So that's really cool. I didn't know that. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, it's in the nature thing that it gets into problems, because morally and ethically, yes, we do want to work toward a goal. We want to improve ourselves. We want progress is always good, right? It's a movement toward maybe closer to God. But in reality, as we can observe, there's a lot of repetition going on, and there's a lot of randomness going on. And so you have to be careful. And the teleological aspect is really an interpretation that fits somebody's goal, as it were. Well, we have to say that this is what you're working toward. This is why this is hard, because you're working toward something better.
Yeah, and that even... I've made notes of that too, where Aristotle says it's not about getting somewhere. It's the practice of being virtuous. It's like you are virtuous when you do the thing. Like it's not enough to just think it in your mind that you would do that or you would behave a certain way. It's like virtue is the behavior when it happens.
Not only the behavior, it is the purposive behavior. That is, it has to be conscious. And that is that you are doing it because it is good. Not to better yourself, not to get your advantage, not to make money, but because it is good. And your heart has to be true. Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. Quite a guy. But
quite a guy. He thought of everything these young men needed to know. Even, there were multiple chapters on friendship, because he saw friendship as a necessity, of course. No man is an island, or whatever came later. And so he waxed eloquently about how to choose your friends. What kind of friends should you have, and why should you have those kinds of friends? I think he's trying to give these men everything they need to lead a virtuous life. And, I think he covers all the bases, because that's why you felt he got tedious.
Yeah, it's just like, I mean, I've read that too in an intro, that he tried to teach regular people how to elevate themselves. But I guess I'm at a stage where I'm like, yeah, I've already given up on some people. Like, look, if you need to be told that, then I don't even care.
Well, I don't think he was trying to lift the lower classes at all. I think he was very aware of the classes, and he knew who his audience was, and they were of the same class. Because this whole idea of virtue is a purposive disposition. So you have to have the disposition to be good. And, the one guaranteed way of having a disposition to be good is to be born in the upper classes. I think that's just a given. That, and it all is of a piece with, people are poor because they're meant to be poor. The poor are always with us, or they're lazy, or they're whatever, as far as you want to go with that. But he knew who his audience was. Slaves and working class people and women, just not included at all. They're not even considered. They're not an issue. But these young men of a certain class, they have every advantage, and with practice, they can learn to be virtuous.
Yeah. So this book is made up of 10 mini books, which were taken from his spoken lectures, likely. And so I read the Penguin book when we first recorded this, and was just surprised how kind of resigned the whatever intro writer was, as he comments throughout the book.
Editor, yeah.
The editor or translator. The first chapters, which is 1 through 4, which is kind of like, I would say, the good part, and then the second half, 5 through chapter 10, is just sucks. where even the editor would be like, so he'd give like one sentence of like, this is
what this means. Yeah.
He's saying this thing again.
Yeah.
Or sentences of like, there's not really an English word for what he's talking about. So good luck with that.
And the historical circumstances and the social circumstances no longer exist. Yeah, dealing with this, and I think I read a Penguin edition also, there are certain problems that are just endemic or just part of the situation. One, you've got translation from ancient Greek to modern English, and that's a problem. Things always get lost in translation. There are not concepts sometimes for something in one context and one time. They just don't exist. And then on top of that, you also got a dialectical problem between British English and American English, and that's a dialect problem, but also a time change and how words change. So on top of that, you also have context changing connotations of words and what that means nowadays. So there's a lot of defining that has to go on, and a lot of disclaimers that have to be made in this translation. It's difficult in some places to know exactly what he was talking about, because the context doesn't exist anymore, or it's just archaic.
Yeah, I then bought a used copy of what's called World's Classics, which is Oxford University Press. And in the second paragraph of the intro, this guy says, book 1 through 4 would probably be a good lecture set. 5 through 8
sucks.
No. Aristotle would probably put that as another course of his school, and then 9 and 10 would be yet another course or something. So he says like, it's kind of like 3 books you're getting here. And I said,
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
that's all I needed to hear.
Right.
Thank you, this guy.
Yeah, you just need to go back to school and have somebody interpret it for you. Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty hard to try and interpret something this old and something this, again, I can't get away from the way that it is so deeply in our culture. So taking it out and analyzing it is difficult. It's a difficult task, and you need a good teacher along to illustrate things for you and make sense of things for you. So that's good. You did an extra step there. That's good.
Oh, so there's, let's say, one thing. I don't want to go book by book because I already don't like even the later ones. But one thing he talks about is voluntary versus involuntary. And if he's saying what I think he is, and I'd like to think I am, is that you have dispositions to behave, and involuntary acts are just totally your animal side doing something.
Yeah, I think so.
And that we can wag the finger at, hey, you shouldn't do that. But even if the result of what happens is actually good, we shouldn't even praise them, because it's just, okay, your animal instinct that you didn't even really think about just did something right. So you're as pleased as a puppy doing something that it doesn't even know is good or bad, but it's good for the rest of us. Then he says, the deliberating is the thinking about, should I do this, and does this cause an inordinate amount of pleasure or an inordinate amount of pain for somebody else? And even knowing that, should I do it? And that's where you're in trouble, where, oh, now that's a good person. That's a virtue. He thought about it. Even though it was maybe painful for him or her, it was good. It was a greater good. That's a virtuous person. Or that is a vicious person who they knew it would be only good for them or inordinately good for them and not as good for someone else, and they did it anyway.
That's right. That's the purposive disposition. That is the purposive part of it. That, man is a rational animal and he has to think about it, not just act. Otherwise, you're just a brute. So yeah, the intellect has to take precedence, and thinking about what is the right thing to do. If you've practiced this and you've been taught by your elders, and then you make an informed decision that's rational and to the good, then yes, that's what deserves praise. You're right.
Yeah, one little passage I ripped out seems to be how one good way to separate it, conveniently, is remorse. So if someone is remorseful of a mistake, that means it was probably on the voluntary, involuntary side, if it was bad. So if you involuntarily kill someone, like by total accident, you're like, oh, I was just trying to go through this green light, and then someone's crossing the street in front of me. I didn't mean to do that, but if I feel horrible, then that's in the animalistic side. And then voluntary is like, well, this guy was going to, I don't know, burn my house down, so I had to kill him. I wish I didn't have to, and I still feel bad about it. That is voluntary, like manslaughter, crime of passion, they say. And then if you premeditated on it, was you realized it, this is bad, and then you justified it to yourself, and someone said, why'd you do that? Well, that was this, and I knew he was going to do it. I deserve this. He should die. Then you're in the homicide.
That's right. And that's
murder.
So you can see, right, where, how deeply this is ingrained. That's the word I guess I've been searching for. In our psyche, in our culture, in our jurisprudence, in our, court system. It's everywhere. This, and I'm assuming that it's not artificially imposed. I'm assuming that he was and I think, bears it out. Our lives bear it out that he was an astute observer and saw the differences between acting in a passionate manner and acting in a deliberative manner. And that is the difference between a crime of passion and premeditated murder. Absolutely.
Yeah, I even printed out the first and the requirements for first or second or third degree murder
Mm-hmm.
is intent, like you knowingly did it because you wanted to get something out of it, like money or something was good for you. And then premeditation, like you waited for an opportune time where there was a chance to do it easily or get away with it easily. And then malice is you just did not care at all that this would devastate
You
the other
wanted to,
person.
yeah, you wanted to hurt. Yeah, you wanted to cause pain. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess all three is like, wow, you are just not a human.
You're
You
bad.
just don't
You're
even.
a bad man. Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Joker level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then we get to on January 6th, some bunch of idiots stormed into our Capitol building, and but did they know they were really committing treason? And should the hammer be dropped on them like any other whatever militant group that's taking control of a federal very important building?
Yeah. You tell me. You go to the Capitol and somebody's breaking through doors, and do you think a reasonable person would assume that is a tourist group or just having frat boy fun? Yeah. So the definition of Aristotle's ethics is virtue is a purposive disposition lying in a mean, not extreme, not too little, not too much, lying in a mean that is relative to us and determined by a rational principle and by that which a prudent man would use to determine it. So are these the actions of a rational and prudent person? Well, an adult. So I think that's the criteria that we have to look at. What's more interesting to me is the intent of Donald Trump with his speech beforehand. Did he, these are maybe unintended consequences, but on the other hand, he knew, that was a war rallying speech he gave, rousing up the troops. But maybe he did not see as far what the unintended consequences might have been. But should he suffer anyway? Should they suffer anyway? Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. Is it deliberate if you deliberated that you could have a defense that it wasn't deliberate later? You could say like,
oh, wow. Yes, indeed it is. It's deliberation twofold.
You cannot prove that I deliberated beforehand that I would deliberately plan for this thing to happen. I deliberately used words that I could say later was not deliberate and was just offhand light comments.
Not in, and that's where context comes in. Given the situation, given his prior words, given the demonstrating the action, seeing how long the action went on before he stepped in and tried to stop things. Yeah, those are all part of the context and what a rational principle would fit and what a prudent man would observe as good or bad. Absolutely. That's precedence, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of the other on another I was consuming the New York Times podcast or something, and and they have people interview people who stormed the Capitol, and they say, oh, it ruined my life. Like, job is gone, neighbors don't talk to me, FBI calling me, showing up at my house, showing up at my job, and that was months ago. So they're all like remorseful. I mean, so you could put that in the involuntary, passionate category. But yeah, who knows? It's just it's crazy. But then there was another topic I thought of where mandatory voting, where you might think like, well, if everybody vote, you make everyone vote. That is democracy. But then you have, the risk of involuntarily voting for bad things, but they're too ignorant or they're too easily swayed. Like, oh, yeah, well, that sounds good. Yeah, we'll do that. Let's vote to no more national parks, put oil drilling everywhere, gas is too high, drill everywhere, right?
Yeah, because we all need gas.
That's long-term bad, but they didn't deliberately choose this bad thing. They involuntarily wanted it because they're stupid. And so then you could say, like, so we have to limit voting to protect from this type of involuntary bad behavior, bad results.
That's the autocratic viewpoint. Absolutely, we have to preserve this, and those people can't be trusted. But the democratic point of view, the point of view of a democracy, is you have to have faith in the people that, and they should have a voice in how they are governed. And in order to make sure that they govern properly and vote properly, you have to make sure that education is substantial and smart. So if you start cutting back funds for education and you keep people stupid and you keep them at a minimum wage or low minimum wage and, that kind of thing, then the question is, are those policies deliberately keeping the people stupid and ignorant?
Whoa.
We got off track there a little bit, but it's all of a piece because we are social animals and we have to live in society. Now, as the globe seems to be moving toward more and more authoritarianism, and democracy is fragile, it's everybody's duty to be informed and vote, not just for your self-interest, but self-interest for the country. But that's a dicey deal.
Yeah, the question is limit voting because, you could have they could vote in the wrong way.
You have a bad electorate. Right. Yeah, you have a stupid electorate or an uneducated electorate. Yeah, I to put a nice word on it. Yeah.
But generally, nope. We just gotta let them have the chance and hope that they don't involuntarily screw everything up
and take steps
forward
with policy to try and make sure that the populace is educated and well informed. Absolutely. There's a responsibility on both sides there. Not only the voters, but the policymakers also.
Yep. This leads into a specific virtue that I got from this book called, we got courage. Everyone knows that. You got temperance, whatever that is.
Not drinking too much.
Then there's a magnificence, which is one I covered in the last podcast that didn't make it, where it's described as using your wealth for public good. And so before there were these, I guess, huge unified governments, you just could be a super wealthy aristocrat and use it towards works that would actually like educate or just help out the common dude. And so then I thought this was a takeaway of the Renaissance banker Lorenzo de' Medici of the Medici family, who usually in history books are seen as the mafia of the Renaissance time.
Oh, totally evil. Yeah.
But they were just the biggest company in history up to that point. They were just lenders and traders and I think probably insurance people. But it was him that invested in huge in squares and art, and Michelangelo lived in his house. So it was him that funded the Renaissance works that live on today, because he was chasing that magnificent virtue.
Yeah, and a little bit closer to home, the mega millionaires now, they fund hospitals. Of course, they get the hospital named after them. That's the pride thing. Like San Francisco General now has what's the Facebook guy? Zuckerberg. Yeah, it's called Zuckerberg Wing or Zuckerberg. Maybe it's Zuckerberg Hospital. I don't know. Andrew Carnegie was a guy who made millions early 19th century America, and then he funded libraries. You find Carnegie libraries all over the United States. He funded them.
Yeah, he has a quote where the wealthy man who dies rich is disgraced, or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Whether it but then we have to look at the motivation, because the story with Carnegie is that he, felt bad about the way he earned his money, or that he earned so much, and so he gave it away to sort of, pave his way into heaven, is the story. But whether the motivation is to, make up for this cheating and lying and horrible dealings that you did as a businessman, or it is to, more altruistic, be like what Aristotle says, don't die with all your money, because, you should be giving it away. You should give back. It benefits society if they do give it back.
Yeah, I mean, you could say Zuckerberg's brand has definitely crumbled to, starting with that movie, I guess, they made about him, where he looked like a total weirdo, and I guess he is a weirdo, but it's a good time to throw some money around.
Yeah, it's good PR, and that's the trouble. We all, United States, when I was growing up, I always thought Americans were always very optimistic. They were optimistic, good-hearted, friendly, saw the best in people, but that's currently changing. And I think that, as the Greeks would say, the scales are falling from our eyes, and we're starting to see the reality that, a lot of the myth making is falling by the wayside, and people are seeing true colors.
Yes, the die is cast. You were saying certain metaphors, so I wanted to say one too.
Go ahead. The scales will fall from their eyes. That's from, I don't know, the Iliad or something.
Yeah. The ram has touched the wall. That's from HBO's Rome.
Oh, really?
I don't
the
know what it
ram
means.
has touched the wall.
Yeah. And the worm has turned.
The worm has turned. The winds are changing. Yes.
Oh,
we can have a cliche off.
But I wanted to say that regardless of the money thrown around in pursuit of magnificence, I mean, there's no question this podcast is on the internet for all 9 billion humans to hear. And so regardless
if they would only avail themselves of that magnificence.
Yeah, according to teleologically, this is a magnificent podcast.
Absolutely.
So,
sharing our knowledge, you bet. Free for nothing. I'm glad we read this, I have to say. Do you have more comments that you want to make about the virtues here?
Well, I got to read it again because I think this Oxford version is better.
Oh.
Which is, I thought penguin. I was totally a penguin man myself, but maybe penguin. I don't know.
Well, look at the difference between the Oxford and Penguin Press and see, what the difference is. Do a little homework there. But I'm glad we read this. I know you thought this was going to be a huge challenge, and it was to a certain extent. And but I think it's very interesting to read something that is so old, and yet we still live by it.
Yeah, I mean, he's not. I was thinking it's overcomplicated. He's just too. I think these books are not really meant to be together. They were just slapped together and recovered through history, and they were spoken. They weren't really read in his day. So it's translated and retranslated and edited. That you just gotta. The first half is good. I like how incrementally he makes it more complicated with first examples like courage. You don't want to be so courageous you just run straight into it and die, but you don't want to be too cowardly you run away. You got to find that sweet spot in the middle.
That's right.
But then he adds dimensions to things, saying like, well, then you got like whatever, desire or something. And he says, well, you don't want to get too much because that's not good. And you don't want to get too little because that's too painful. But then you got another X or Y axis of, well, what should you desire?
Right.
And what should you not desire? And so then you literally have a now X and Y axis together. You got to be in the middle of.
That's right.
And then he goes on, he adds even more. And he adds complexity to it, which is kind of neat. But then it ends in like book 5 or something.
But because life is complex, and because whenever anybody says, look, it's simple, don't believe it. I never believe that, because it's never simple. It's always complicated. And it's always, there are always contextual elements that influence your decision, And so it's always complicated. It's never simple. That's all I want to say. And trying to live a virtuous life, to achieve happiness, that's what struck me in the very beginning, that the goal of life is to be happy. I was so surprised at that. I thought that was a very modern concept, to be happy. But here it is in Aristotle. Happiness is the goal of life. And how do you get there? You live life well. And by well, he means virtuously in his definition of the word virtuous, not ours, which is a little bit narrower.
I did also try to remember what is the deal with Socrates. Where does he fit in? And again, it has to do with that whole Peloponnesian War, where Athens was a huge maritime power, trading and using their boats for power. And then eventually they had these collection of city-states, and Athens was collecting too much money, or hey, you're too rich. This is now not even fair. So they needed a rival to counter that, and that was Sparta, and Athens lost. And so what happened was, when Athens lost, it used to be a democracy, 30 oligarchic tyrants took over, called the 30, and they were kind of supported by Sparta. Not really a puppet, but kind of you handle it over there. And 2 of those 30 were students of Socrates. So they were seizing property, killing people, exiling people, because this is the new order. We are the 30. We have the support of Sparta, so we're in charge now. And for 8 months, they killed over 1,000 people and just took their land. And 2 of them, were Socrates' students, and their names were Critias and Charmides. And Socrates didn't have to leave; he just hung out in Athens, so he was not threatened. And so once the 30 were overthrown, democracy came back, and they had scores to settle. So they said, Socrates, what did you teach these guys, and why didn't you try to stop them? And Socrates was he's always elusive. He's well, I didn't think it was good to do that, but I didn't do anything to stop it. And so his charge was he was put to death for corrupting the youth, which means those guys, I think, that were put in charge after the war. It was revenge for teaching those 2 guys.
Oh, could be.
And Plato was his student, and they were how could you do this? We're supposed to be the city of intellect, and you killed our greatest thinker. I got to do something about this. So he wrote his books, where Socrates is the main character in all his stories, teaching everybody about how your petty squabbles about what should I do, it's all wasting time. You need to just enter the mind and realize there's just an infinite thing to think about in the mind. And Aristotle was his student. So Plato was so upset of these Philistines murdering his teacher and not realizing the genius they had. And then Aristotle's his response is well, you're too cerebral. We need to work with what we got. And that's where I thought of the Vulcans and the humans in Star Trek, where the Vulcans are this is the way it is. We're in utopia. In utopia, that's it. We don't need exceptions to the rules. And the humans are well, we have exceptions all over the place. Yeah. And
we're down here in the trenches. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to puzzle out each one. And the Vulcans are that sounds just really annoying. And that's where I am with Aristotle's examples. I'm like, these are all too annoying. Just no.
Well, he's trying to consider, although I don't think he gives definitive behavioral lessons. He does try to consider as many potential pitfalls as possible so that he can educate his students properly. That's his responsibility. I think he feels it's his responsibility, his duty. And again, since this wasn't really intended to be a book, it was a series of lectures. God knows how long, that was intended to take place. Is it a year of study? And built into lectures also is a certain amount of repetition so that main points are hit again and again so that, they get deeper and deeper into the student's mind. So they're built into any lecture. There's always going to be a certain amount of repetition. And I think we see that here. And it's sort of like the way Plato wrote, gathered up all of the knowledge he knew from Socrates and published it. These are the followers of Aristotle probably gathering up as much of his writings as possible and publishing it. So it's not lost.
Yeah, it's funny. That's why there's other people who say that Plato was the originator of like authoritarian regime style, where the smart ones are on top. Everybody know your place. Some people are going to be farming. You're going to be ditch digging, and we're going to we're going to, let us do the thinking. and that conveniently fits, authoritarian, whether it's communist or I don't know, dictatorship. Or something. Absolutely.
And of course, this concept that, America's built on, that all men are created equal. Well, already right there, you're leaving out half the human race because it's all men are created equal. And of course, we know we're not created equal. Of course, we know that some people have advantages and others don't. And we also know that some people are physically better than others. So it's a theory. It's a great experiment. And if we can make that the starting point and just assume, rather than assume, well, you're low class, I'm not even going to listen to anything that you say. If we just assume, well, maybe you have some good ideas and there can be flexibility and rising and falling within the ranks and outside of the ranks, let's try it that way. But you have the problem of the populace not being educated enough or smart enough. So would it be better to have the smart people in charge? Probably. But right now, the smart people equals the business people. And I don't think, I want that. Do you want this government to be ruled by Zuckerberg and Bezos and the Tesla guy? No, thanks.
Nope. Yep. Well.
So if you the big concept is if you raise up people, we all get higher. So that's my sort of philosophy, I think.
Yeah, you want to. I think that's the key. You want to. That was the. You got involuntary, voluntary actions, and then you got deliberative or purposive.
Yes, conscious
behavior.
Or purposive. Yeah.
And just seeing how, that's why we separate.
Yes.
Intentional crimes or accidental ones. We're like, well, it was accidental, but you still did it. Or was it unavoidable? And that's where you got to find the case and then how much was a punishment or something.
Right.
But yeah, the Occam's razor version where it's like, well, if it's simple, I'll just go with that. That is convenient and seems like it should be right, but it's not necessarily always. So.
Not necessarily always, or at least, consider it a starting point.
Yep. Well, that is exactly 1 hour, and I am hungry.
Perfect. Okay, so let's call it a day with this, which I guess you're right, is actually our 8th podcast revisit, Aristotle. And next time we meet, We're going to look at Bob Odenkirk's autobiography or memoir. Comedy, drama.
Yeah. All right, well, that's going to do it for this one. We will see you next time.
Signing off.
Bye-bye.